Good morning. Welcome to the Meristem Minute. This morning we have Ed Corrigan from Brant with us to give us a key foliar refresher. So Ed, why don't you kick it off and tell us what's important right now with the stage that our corn and soybeans are in?
So most of the central part of the U.S., we're really seeing the early crop that was planted very early is looking very good. But as we plant later and later, we're running into dry conditions, really a lot of stress. And we saw this stress in the early planted fields early on. They're starting to pull through it some. But as we get into these drier conditions, we start to see the need for nutrients that are typically mobile in the soil, but the dry soil conditions are really limiting that. So HOMESTRETCH is actually a foliar technology that actually meets the needs of the plant when it comes to staying compatible. So it can be blended with any of the herbicides, fungicides, micronutrients are all available. And we're really seeing those be very active when we add it to and stay compatible. If we don't have compatibility, we really have some problems. And so that was the number one thing when it was created, that it's compatible. It also lowers the pH of the solution. That is paramount to being able to drive that herbicide or insecticide into the plant leaf. The high pH of those plant leaves, due to the dusty conditions of dry weather creates, are very difficult to penetrate for most solutions, and the lowering the pH. So it automatically lowers that for you, and that is really paramount in delivering that nutrition, but also the herbicide kill, the insecticide kill. We also have a truly unique micronutrient protection system, so it really protects that nutrition and the herbicide and the insecticide so that they really don't interfere with each other once they've started to move into the plant or on the plant leaf. It's not a chelate or a complex. Chelates and complex are great products. Chelates in particular for in the soil to keep them from binding right away in the soil, but they're not very good because of their size for foliar applications. So we really have a unique design product by our chemists to create HOMESTRETCH that really assists us. And lastly, during these hot, dry weather, re-wettable after dry down. If you have most of our products out there, as they dry, they're going to dry to a crystal on that leaf. Very difficult for them to get re-wetted and move back into the leaf. This product, the HOMESTRETCH brand, any of those that are put on the crop will actually dry to a gel. They'll never go to an actual crystal, and they'll be re-wettable at the next evening dew, anything of that nature, and push them in if they didn't completely get moved in on application. So we've really got some great technology that differentiates the HOMESTRETCH product. And to give you a view, we also have something that the HOMESTRETCH really sees when we look at it on the surface of a leaf. So if we've got the surface of a leaf and we're applying, you'll start to see the nutrients try to move in, and they will move in on the competitor products, but they really have difficulty to get through into the phloem. The phloem is what takes nutrition down to the roots of the plant, and we're really seeing issues with not being able to get through. So most products don't have a small molecule, they've got a larger one, especially chelates. They are a big molecule, and that really is difficult for them, so they'll lay on that surface, where the HOMESTRETCH is a very cylindrical, small, and it'll go through what's called these hydrophilic pores on the leaf. They don't even have to go through a stomata. So stomatas are big openings. The plant, as it's hot and dry, closes those. So it's really difficult to get most products to move through. These are designed in a very small cylindrical cylinder type design, and they'll move right through with the HOMESTRETCH. Secondarily, once they're down through there, then they start to really move through the plant. They move down through the phloem and up through, and so they're feeding the roots, as well as feeding the top. So as we make most applications, you'll see that they'll just move nutrients through the xylem and up out of the soil zone. And that's where it's real difficult in dry conditions for this to actually happen. So we'll see that xylem only cannot meet the needs of that growing plant, and it's actually lowers the amount of root growth. When we use the HOMESTRETCH brand, we'll see that phloem, xylem, both working, and that's what really differentiates the HOMESTRETCH brand. And it assists that herbicide movement in the plant as well as through the leaf because of that lowering the pH and allowing it to move through it with it. So we'll see that opportunity to move to the root systems and back up in the plant. So these plant leaves are going to be much drier, dustier, maybe rolled up. We need those micronutrients to go on with that to actually improve that whole system.
So Ed, right now in the marketplace, there's a lot of deficiencies showing up. And sulfur is one I'd call attention to. And so even though guys have great fertility out there, you know, these applications work well in normal conditions, but even though they have great fertility out there, these applications right now can be a bit maximized because the sulfur hasn't had time to process in the soil to become available.
Yeah, so sulfur has to have oxidation process if it's in the sulfur in the soil, and that oxidation takes moisture, it takes the correct pH for that to happen, and of course the right temperature. And so we start out in cold soils, we move quickly through, and a lot of that oxidation didn't happen until just in the last 3 weeks to a month. Well, that along with now we've got dry conditions. So what we really understood to be mobile elements, sulfur is mobile in the soil, like molybdenum, like boron, like manganese, mobile in the soil. But if there's no moisture, it cannot move to those roots correctly. And so it doesn't meet the needs of that plant. That plant, and we've seen this in other drought years, that really stymies its ability. And so not having the proper amount of manganese, zinc, sulfur really starts to yellow the crop, but it also, those are the same elements that are necessary to help that plant to metabolize the herbicide, then, and that really causes an extra whitening or yellowing of those crops because they're struggling to utilize enough manganese to accomplish that. So if they do break down the herbicide, they burned all that manganese that they were planning to use for the crop, and that yellows the beans. It doesn't allow the corn plants to metabolize and break down and grow fast. So we're really seeing more stress as we apply these herbicides. We know we got to have this herbicide on there to control the weeds, and insecticides are paramount in these dry conditions. So why do we really worry about insecticides? Because the insects are going to start attacking us as soon as we get into bloom stage like these soybeans. We need zinc really to help push these plants, the soybean plants, into a flowering stage. The HOMESTRETCH product has that zinc in it. It has manganese to help with the photosynthesis. So we're really seeing that in the lower pH of the solution improve that insecticide working, even in dry conditions. That is paramount on a dry year to assist a soybean plant. That, like I say, zinc really stimulates early flowering. Flowering early on soybeans is what gives us that extra 10 bushel yield improvement if we can get it to flower before the summer solstice of June 20th. The phloem technology is moving that phloem nutrition up and down the phloem and xylem. It's really part of the way in which the product assists not only in a soybean plant above ground, but also providing manganese, sulfur, molybdenum, and boron for the nodule formation to produce lots and lots of nitrogen to be able to produce high amounts of soybean yield. And so that's part of this whole improvement process to photosynthesis is to have those elements there. So dry weather, you have to remember, it's really limiting those soil mobile nutrients, sulfur, molybdenum, manganese, and boron. Those are the key elements that really are needed for soybeans. And of course, zinc is also very important as part of that for corn. You can see on the top right, that corn plant that has some real sulfur deficiency symptoms where it's striped a little, but it really is highlighted at the top of the plant. And a week later, after HOMESTRETCH was applied, these were those same plants. Now you can see the darker green color coming out the center of those new growth. That is an indication that sulfur is there. And that's one of the most leading problems we're seeing currently. We'll continue to see molybdenum, manganese, and boron be very instrumental as corn and soybeans mature through this crop year.
So Ed, thank you for that. You know, in the Meristem team, we really have focused on the fungicide pass and working with HOMESTRETCH NKB, and we've seen the value, we've seen the results. But I think one thing to really call out in this situation, the conditions we have this year could really, outshine. These early applications could outshine even what the NKB does at fungicide, from the perspective that, like we discussed, even if you are an incredible farmer that has great fertility, that fertility may not be available in these dry conditions. And then also, just helping with that stress mitigation, feeding that plant. I think in the last Meristem Minute, Brewer Blessett did a great job laying out that even though we focus so much on nitrogen, micronutrients are really used to a greater degree in this early stage, and they're so important. And so by able to get those in the plant when they can't get it through the soil right now, that could pay huge dividends this year. Would you agree?
I would agree. And we've seen sulfur really be one of those driving elements, especially during these dry years. That's why we're seeing this yellowing in it. And so adding even something like a sulfur 17 to this typical early application is paramount to meeting the needs of that plant. Sulfur is going to be a very key ingredient. Molybdenum, manganese, very key for corn plants and soybean plants to keep that good dark color, utilize the nitrogen correctly. And of course, boron is one of the biggest ones that we can really point to in past years of drought, where we got huge responses on soybeans and corn. That is really, this is the type of year where stress is to the paramount, to the highest. And of course, we normally see in dry years, prices of grain will go back up. So we don't want to be caught with not having a good crop in a high grain price once these crops start to go along farther.
Thank you so much, Ed. Greatly appreciate it. So to wrap up, what I'm hearing is some HOMESTRETCH on the corn acre with some sulfur 17, HOMESTRETCH Ultra on the soybean acre with some sulfur 17, and then evaluate yields and focus on that NKB at that foliar pass.
That's right. It is going to be key to put on that foliar pass earlier than normal, even as we get in close to this reproductive stage.
Thank you so much. And we'll close this Meristem Minute out.
Thank you.